So, shalom, everyone, and welcome to our week 31 Coffee and Connection. I'm being told that I have too many windows open. It's hurting my connection. Let me just go ahead and close a bunch of stuff so that you can all hear me. Let's see what else I can. Oh my goodness. Do you have a million windows open on your screen? Here we are. Okay. Okay. That should be good. Okay. Let's see. I hope that's helpful. Now I seem to be totally frozen. Why am I totally frozen? I don't know if I'm totally frozen for everyone or just on my screen. Go ahead and put in the chat if you can hear me. Yes, meaning yes, I'm frozen. Let me turn off my video for a minute and see if when I turn it back on. Okay, now I think it's working. It was so weird. Okay, it's weird to see yourself frozen like that. Okay, and you can hear me. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. So welcome to week 31, Coffee and Connection. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, everyone, for letting me know. I'm really excited about today's topic because, I was thinking just now, I'm thinking like, oh, I should have done something like for the 9 days and leading up to Tisha B'Av. And the truth is that this topic is so appropriate for this time of year. And I'll tell you why. Because right now, what we're talking about, what we're in, is this time period where there's this loss of connection, right? A loss of connection with Hashem, a loss of connection with the Beit HaMikdash, a loss of connection with each other, right? That's why the answer to it is Avas Chinam, and we have, Tumas Sinas Chinam that's getting in the way. There's disconnect, there's disconnection. And what we want to do is create connection. Now, what I hear from my clients over and over again, and honestly, what I can even tell you for myself, comes up over and over again as the source of disconnection is kind of this fear, or not even necessarily a fear, but like a not really understanding what's going on for us, right? And feeling when we feel when something triggers us, when we're suddenly upset, and this often is what's getting in the way of the communication, right? Communication, which has the ability to create connection and create intimacy, we're often scared to communicate, or we're not communicating the way that we want to because of the stuff that's coming up for us, the way that we're suddenly getting so upset and we don't know why, or the way that something's really bothering us and we may not even know why, or we know why it's bothering us, but we don't want it to bother us, and yet it is. How do we handle that? What do we do about that? Because if we just kind of let it sit in the space, we're going to often be upset, especially in times when we don't want to be upset, or we're going to be scared of communicating. There's definitely also on the other side, right? What do we do when the other person's getting upset? The other person's bringing up all their stuff. But right now, I want to focus on our own struggles with our emotions. And as I said, this can really cause us to not have the connection we're looking for, both because we're not being who we want to be, and we're not able to often even start to communicate about issues because we're so bothered by it, and we're so upset, and we know that if we do, we're not going to be who we want to be, right? So let me know in the comments if this is resonating with you. And what I want to share is that it's important to understand that we're always going to have different emotions coming up, and different issues coming up for us. Okay, that happens because of the fact that everything that we see in the world around us, right, is being held up next to what we make it mean, right? How we make it mean, what we make it mean is going to determine how we then respond to it. And this is important to understand that we often think of our emotions as like the gut, that we have no control over. And the truth is, in the first moment when you have that emotion, you don't really have control over it. And that's why it's important to honor it and respect it and hear it and give it space. But then we have the power to get curious with it and try to figure out where it's coming from. Because here's the thing, every emotion is coming from a thought that we're thinking, right? We only feel the way we feel because of something that we're thinking about that's causing us to then feel that way. Let me give you an example. Let's say, let's pick something that like, oh my gosh, is like totally normal to like freak out about, right? Let's say you just finished cleaning up and your kid dumps a bowl of Cheerios or cornflakes on the floor, right? Probably depends which country you're in, if it's more likely to be Cheerios or cornflakes. But they dump a bowl of cereal on the floor. Or let's say you're out with a bunch of people and your husband makes a joke that is kind of meant to put you down. Or let's say you just finished baking a cake or a dinner or whatever, and all of a sudden you realize that it's burning or it all falls on the floor, right? How do you respond to those issues? Well, yes, the quote unquote normal thing is going to be to freak out, lose it, get upset, but recognize that that's only going to happen if based on how you interpret it, what you make it mean in that moment, right? If your kid dumps a bowl of cereal on the floor and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? I just cleaned up. Now I have to clean it up again. You're going to get really upset. But if in that moment you're thinking, oh, kids, like, isn't that crazy? As soon as I make a mess of they make, as soon as I clean up, they make a mess. You're going to have a very different kind of reaction, right? If you find your husband's sense of humor hilarious and you know that he's not trying to hurt you, he's just trying to be funny, and you appreciate his sense of humor, right? Now, it's different if you don't. I'm not saying, this is, let's say you did appreciate it. Let's say you you totally got that he was just making a joke, then that joke wouldn't bother you, right? Or if you burnt the food, but you're thinking like, instead of beating yourself up and thinking, what's wrong with you, Chana? How could you make such a mistake? You're thinking like, oh, well, I guess we're all having cornflakes for dinner, right? Whatever it is, then see, that's going to change the way you perceive it, right? So I'm getting comments here like, well, my husband makes embarrassing jokes and he likes to be funny, but it's not funny. You're right. If you don't find it funny, you don't find it funny, right? But what we're expressing here is that how you think about what's happening is going to make a difference as to the response that you have. Okay. Now, let's use the joke, the husband making a joke, because that could be really powerful, right? If your husband's making the joke and in that moment you're hurt by it, now still, even if it bothers you, even if you don't like the joke, there's still different ways that you can respond. You can respond with, I really don't like that joke. I'm kind of hurt by that joke. It embarrassed me, right? As opposed to thinking, you're such a jerk. How could you have said that? You're trying to embarrass me, right? Those are going to create different emotions. One's going to create the emotion of maybe being embarrassed as opposed to the emotion of being angry, right? And it's all based on our thoughts. That's the crazy thing. And I want you to just kind of let that sink in for a moment. Even right now, in this moment, how you're feeling while I'm speaking, right? How you're sitting in your chair, or like the emotion that you're feeling right now, to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What is the thought that preceded this emotion? Okay. And what this means is that when we're recognizing this and really really internalizing that idea means that in the moment when we are upset, in the moment when we are getting hurt, in that moment when we are finding ourselves kind of not being who we want to be, that means that we aren't just what's the word I'm looking for here? We are not victims of our emotions. Okay? We can in that moment start a process, begin a process to choose how we are going to feel and how we are going to respond. Okay. And that process, it's true that it necessitates being really in tune with ourselves and being open to thinking about these kinds of things and getting curious with ourselves. And it is in our control, right? Which is amazing when we think about it, as opposed to thinking that, when we're sad, we're just sad. When we're angry, we're just angry, right? When we feel really frustrated, like, well, I'm frustrated. I'm really. So remember, though, that with everything that I'm saying, that this does not mitigate, that's the word, right? Does not mitigate the need to first respect the feeling. That we have to do. We often jump to the next part. Respect the feeling. And remember, because if we don't respect the feeling, we can't work through the feeling. If I'm sad and I keep telling myself, you're not sad, let's just move on to being happy, I can't figure out why I'm sad and work through that and then recognize the thought that's creating that feeling and get curious with that thought. I can't do any of that if I'm just pushing it away. And so then I'm going to actually allow that thought to just be staying in my head and making me sad. So we always want to start with respecting how I'm feeling, right? And then we can start to get curious with that, right? And this is already answering that question of why do I lose it when I don't want to? Well, the reason we're losing it when we don't want to is often because there is a thought that's coming up for us that is creating that feeling. And often it's especially when we're trying to be in a good mood and stay happy that that's going to happen. Especially then. Why? Because as we're trying to be happy, we may be pushing away the feelings. And again, once we're trying to push it away, we can't get curious with it. So how do we get curious with a feeling? I'm going to walk you through the process very quickly. Each of these steps are something that can take time to master. And that's what we do in the Absolutely Feminine program. We really go through and master each of these steps. But I want to make it clear for you. I want to just map it out. And then again, like we talked about last week, you can just mark for yourself which of these steps is something that you feel you could use some support with, and which of them you feel like, good, I can do that. And you can try it out. Okay. So let's say you're feeling upset. Let's say you're, let's say you're with your husband and he says something that upsets you. Okay. The very first thing to notice, I know this sounds so simple, but it's actually really important and we often don't do it, is recognizing as quickly as possible, I am upset, I am hurt, I am angry, I am sad, I am embarrassed, giving it a name. That's really important because as soon as we give it a name, we take it from the emotional, irrational part of our brain and we put it into the logical, rational part of our brain. See why that's important, right? Then we can start to think about it and deal with it in a rational way. Not that our emotions are bad, they're great. But as soon as we can label them, we can start to deal with them. So start by asking yourself, what am I feeling right now? Right? And catching that you are feeling that feeling. Then you can ask yourself, where am I feeling it? So often we feel emotions in our heart or in our stomach. Some people feel it in their neck or their throat or their shoulders or your head, right? That's why you see people kind of rubbing their forehead or even their wringing their hands, right? Ask yourself, where am I feeling it? And see if you can just bring your hands to that part of your body. And as soon as you do that, you are already interrupting that flow, that pattern of going right into your feeling and allowing your feeling to take you wherever your feeling takes you, right? As soon as you give it a name and you put your hands on it, you have made a change in your go-to pattern, right? You've interrupted it, which is already a huge game changer. Because here's the thing also, I'm throwing a lot of different stuff out here, but all of this is so connected and so important. When you go into your emotion, okay, you're kind of flipping into your more subconscious, like animal nefesh kind of brain. When you give it a name and you bring attention to it, you're already thinking more rationally, more free will, neshama kind of thoughts about it. Okay, so you want to right away, as soon as you can, name it and put your hands on it. And in that way, you are giving yourself the power to choose, right? You're getting out of that subconscious pattern, no control zone, and moving into, I now have control over how I'm going to respond. Now, this is right here is where I know this is where I can easily mess up, because those things are coming up for me, as I'm feeling upset or hurt or bothered or frustrated, we may tend to kind of like push it away and talk ourselves through it way too quickly. No, I'm not upset. No, I'm going to stay calm. Everything, I'm sure that, I don't want to get upset. And we so quickly try to talk ourselves through it that what happens is that the emotions just keep building up. In that moment, it's very important to stop and catch it and communicate it to yourself and maybe even to someone else. I'm feeling really hurt right now. I'm actually feeling really frustrated. Can we pause for a moment? I'm feeling really sad. Maybe I could get a hug, or let's just I need some time, right? In that moment, if we could pause and give ourselves space to process it and even communicate it, right? Think of how many fights, how many spirals, how many tantrums we would get ourselves out of, right? Just from doing that, just from recognizing, oh, I'm feeling something right now, and giving it that space instead of trying to push it away, pretend everything's okay, and then spiraling out, right? Now, from there, that's when you can start to ask yourself and get curious, why am I feeling this way, right? And one way that you can, a great question that I've heard that really allows you to stay in that free will space is to ask yourself, why am I choosing to feel this way? As soon as you ask yourself, why am I choosing to feel this way? There's like this understanding that, hey, like part of this is a choice. It's based on how I'm choosing to think about it, right? And then we get to get curious with it, right? Why am I sad? What's making me sad? Why am I scared? Am I really in danger? Did he mean to hurt me? Remember that we can be hurt by something. That doesn't mean the other person intended to hurt us, right? We can separate those two. I can be frustrated that there's cereal over the floor, but not be frustrated at my, 2-year-old who doesn't know better, right? I can be, this just happened today with my kids where they spent it worked out in the end, but they spent like all day working on this play. And then last minute when they wanted to video it, like the 4-year-old was like, I don't want to do it. He was too tired. And they're like, and one of them was all frustrated. I spent the whole day and it's for nothing. And I was that expression of separating. Yes, it's frustrating, and he's just being a kid, right? He's just doing what kids do. He's tired, whatever. And being able to separate between those two can be huge and game changing, right? I can be frustrated or sad about how someone acted, or how I could be frustrated that I have to deal with something, or sad about what I'm struggling with, and separate that from other people in the situation, right? Realizing that I may not like that joke, let's say, for example, because it may trigger me in some way, it may trigger something within me. That doesn't mean that he intended to hurt me, or that like that he intended, right? And I could express, I know that you were just trying to be funny and you didn't think it would hurt me, but it actually triggered something inside me that made me feel really hurt, right? And see, when we're thinking about our emotions in that kind of logical way, because we've respected them, then we can have those kinds of conversations, and communicate in that way on a deeper level, right? And on a connecting level, and actually create real connection while we are being the women that we want to be. Right. So I'm just going to check if I answered everything. If anyone has any questions, especially following up on this, go ahead and put it in the chat. So, how can I manage my emotions and be the woman I want to be? Is going to be, remember, respecting them, recognize it, and then recognizing what is the thought that's causing me to feel this way, right? Why am I even choosing to feel this way? And always knowing that there is a thought behind our feeling. And this can actually, as I said before, be a very empowering thought, because it means that we can control our emotions instead of our emotions controlling us, right? Um, and so the question I'm being asked now is, can we revisit the husband's joke example when the husband does mean to hurt? So if the husband does mean to hurt, that's where it would be very important to express, that was really painful. Now, it's one thing that I will invite you to consider is that we may assume that our husband meant to hurt us because it was hurtful, whereas if you express to him that you felt hurt, right? He may say, that was not my intention, right? But we may be assuming that because to us it seems like such a hurtful comment, but to him, that wasn't his intention at all. And that doesn't make it okay, right? We're separating between something not being okay and the person intending it. And that's why it would be important to be able to express, that joke actually really hurt my feelings and it really bothered me. Um, so, um, so if your husband is treating you poorly, that's where you want to even just get kind of curious, like, is that his intention? And even asking, you may even want to ask him, like, what did you mean by that comment that you made? Especially if you can say it in a safe way. So should we always communicate our feelings to our husbands? That's a great question. It is important to communicate our feelings to our husbands. What I suggest is often before we can there's two pieces to this. I was actually just coaching someone about this earlier. There's two pieces of advice that I would give. Okay. The general advice is, yes, to communicate your feelings to your husband, but after you've worked it through and figured out what's really bothering you. Okay. Because often what we think is bothering us is not what's really bothering us. It could be that what's bothering us is something that we made what he did mean, right? Which still might have something to say. Like, it still may be, well, when you did that, it made me feel, but you want to get really clear on what's really bothering you so that you can then communicate clearly what's actually bothering you. And because it may be that there's really nothing to communicate, it may just be your own stuff that you need to work through. Okay, that's the general advice, and I have a whole like a whole process that I give over on how to work that through and be able to know how to communicate with him. On the other hand, if you're sitting there stewing and you just like there's no way you're just so upset, and ideally go, if you're so upset you want to go do something for yourself, you want to get out, you want to work things through. But if you really can't, then rather than sit there and like really stew, it may be better to go in there and say, I'm just feeling so frustrated right now, I'm feeling so hurt. But in either case, it's really important to communicate it as, this is what I'm feeling, as opposed to this is what you did, for two reasons. Number one, as soon as someone hears this is what you did, they're going to get defensive. That's just, and then nobody's going to be heard and there's no connection. Okay. And because it's important to recognize, again, as I said in the beginning, everything that happens, we are interpreting through our own minds and what we're making it mean. So it may very well be that he didn't mean that, right? And that's why it's important to communicate in that way, that this is how I felt. And that way, even if he says, well, I didn't mean it, you might say, okay, I hear that you didn't mean it. And I felt that way. It made me feel that way still, right? Which is still important to express. So here I say, he never says he's sorry, doesn't seem to care. He takes everything out on me instead of others. So that's a really important, this is a whole separate topic that husbands generally, men in general, don't generally apologize with words. So it could be that he is sorry that he hurt you. And that's why it's important to communicate in a way that doesn't put him on the defensive, so that he can actually hear you, right? So that's what I was saying about communicating about how I felt is going to make it easier for him to actually hear you. And also, when there's in general safety in the relationship, he's going to be much more able to hear what it is that you're expressing. Okay. And if there's a recurring joke, even if you have explained how much it hurt and he validated this, but does it again and again, it could be that, as you say, because it's a pattern, that he forgets, right? It's a pattern. So he's just like, even though he acknowledged it, he then makes the joke again. And so, whenever we're stuck in a pattern, it takes time to break that pattern. And so you could just gently remind him after, like, that joke, remember that joke? It really hurts. It really hurts me. And I'd really love for it not to be made, or that, it really upset me that joke was made again. He may not even, he may really appreciate the reminder. You could just keep letting him know that it hurt you, right? Because as I said, every pattern can take time to break. That's a big thing that I hear so often. Like, I told my husband I didn't like something. He said, okay. And then he did it again. Remember that patterns take time. Right? Patterns take time to break, and it doesn't have to mean that he doesn't care, or that he wasn't listening, or that his apology wasn't real. It could just mean that he's stuck in a pattern, and you reminding him interrupts that pattern, and hopefully he'll figure out how to change that pattern, and you can keep letting him know and expressing how it makes you feel. Okay, so but and all this is really important, and perhaps we'll dive into that more, this whole topic of dealing with our husbands. How do we handle it when our husbands are being mean or saying things we don't like? I want to just wrap up that with the goal of this week's topic was, how do we handle our negative feelings? And the recognizing that our feelings are created by our thoughts, recognizing that our feelings it's so important to validate and name and see where our feelings are coming from, both physically and, there's a word with a C that I'm not thinking of, cognitively, right, in our heads, that can really make a difference. So anytime you feel yourself getting really upset, the next time that happens, right, probably today, tomorrow, right? Whenever you're feeling like a negative emotion, which is totally normal, just see if you can bring some awareness and start to get curious. What was I thinking that right before I started to think this? Okay. So thank you all for your questions, your comments, for being here. I'm excited to let you know that the new replay page is almost available. Really excited working on my website finally, and it's going to be there. Until then, the other page is still up, and I will let you know when all of that is done. So thank you all for joining me, and until next week, may we all be blessed to live, love, and be loved with all our hearts. Goodbye for now.